All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be the last video of Standard 4. This is Flipped Class video number 13. And we're going to talk about the impact of the Columbian Exchange. So after the arrival of Europeans in the Americas, 90% of the indigenous or the native population died because of disease. This major loss led to a shortage of labor in order to work those European plantations in the Americas. Plantations were growing crops such as sugar, tobacco, and cotton, which was very difficult to work. So to replace those natives that had died due to the diseases, the Europeans began to import or to bring in slaves from Africa. Since the arrival of the Europeans in the Americas, slavery had been based on race. The two groups that could serve as slave labor were Native Americans and Africans. The use of race as the basis for the system of slavery led to a social structure in the Americas that was strictly defined by a person's heritage, so their background. The plantation system also destroyed the native economic systems of the Americas and ultimately damaged the environment that had been so important to the indigenous people. Spain's pattern of conquest. Conquered areas were settled by peninsulares, which are native Spaniards. Most of the new settlers were men who had relationships with native women. And you know what kind of relationships those are? The ones that produce offspring. And the offspring that the settlers had with those native women, they are called mestizo. And a mestizo means someone who is mixed Spanish and Native American. All right, so Standard 4E, you're going to be able to map and explain the triangular trade. So what is the triangular trade? Here is a map that shows you a triangle has three sides. So we're going to have one side that goes from the Americas to Europe, one side that goes from Europe to Africa, and the last side that goes from Africa to the Americas. So if we take a look at the next slide, it says Route 1. And if we look at this diagram, Route 1, it's going to begin in Europe, and these are going to be manufactured goods that are going to go from Europe to Africa. Manufactured goods are man-made goods, such as guns and textiles, such as clothing and bed linens, and you remember what textiles are. Route 2 is going to begin here in Africa. Route 2 is where African slaves are going to be transported to the Americas, and they're going to be traded for plantation crops. So the only quote-unquote good along this route are slaves. Route 3, we are going to begin in the Americas, and it's going to go from the Americas back to Europe. And this is where plantation crops are going to go, which these plantation crops are going to be taken to Europe and turned into these manufactured goods. And we're going to revisit that here in just a bit. All right, so a forced journey. You all know the Africans that were captured in Africa, it was not something they wanted to do. It was forced. So the Africans that were transported to the Americas were a part of a transatlantic trading network known as the Triangular Trade Route. Transatlantic, if you break this word down into two, trans means across. Atlantic is referring to the Atlantic Ocean. Middle Passage. The Middle Passage is the actual journey that the slaves took from Africa to the Americas. So this is when they are packed onto boats and shipped across the Atlantic Ocean. It is considered the middle leg of the triangular trade. It was a horrific journey for the slaves. Take a look at this picture, this diagram. This is an actual diagram of a slave ship. And it is hard to tell, but all of these black lines with like a dot and two lines coming out of the bottom, those are people. And they had the Africans stacked on top of one another on planks. They only had like a few inches of room between where the plank that they were laying on to the plank above them. So it was really a jam-packed experience, so to speak, for them. The European people tried to put as many Africans on each boat as they possibly could. They arranged them in such a way where you could not remove just one African from a plank. You had to take off an entire line. They were chained together. Unfortunately, if somebody had passed away in the middle there, you were probably laying next to or very close to a dead person for a little while. They were also not given restroom breaks. There were no toilets on the boat. So if you had to go to the bathroom, well, you were doing it right there in the area that you slept. And God forbid, if you were on one of the bottom planks, whatever seeped through made it down to you. It's disgusting to even think about. A lot of Africans died. So that is why they tried to jam as many on a boat as possible to ensure the most money made when they got to the Americas. Very depressing. All right, so turn to the back of your note sheet. On the back here, we have a diagram of the triangular trade. When you guys do a triangular trade, it has to make sense. And what do I mean by this? Okay, so if you look here, a manufactured good, rum. All right, so if you look at rum as a manufactured good, you need to think about what the raw material is that makes rum. And lo and behold, it's sugar. All right, so they take sugar from the Americas, bring it to Europe on the triangular trade, make rum, bring the rum to Africa, exchange it for slaves. That, again, is the only quote-unquote good along that leg of the triangular trade. Chains and guns. To make chains and guns, both of these, you need iron. So the raw material for chains and gun is iron. For cigars and cigarettes, to make this manufactured good, you need, well, tobacco. That is your raw material. To make clothing, those textiles, you're going to need cotton. That is the raw material needed to make the clothing and other textiles. Lastly, household goods, meaning table, chairs, a bed frame, things like that, household goods like that. They used lumber. Lumber is just a fancy schmancy word for wood. So that's when they cut down trees, take the lumber, and turn it into tables and chairs, etc. All right, so that's how it makes sense. If you did a triangle, you would put from the Americas to Europe, you would put sugar. From Europe to Africa, you would put rum. And from Africa to the Americas, it will always be slaves. So sugar, rum, slaves. Or iron, chains, slaves. Or cotton, clothing, slaves. I hope that made sense. All right, label the middle passage. So again, the middle passage, that is the slaves' horrific journey that they took from Africa. here's Africa right here, to the Americas, so which is right here. So it's this line right here. You are going to label Middle Passage. This line right here, Middle Passage. All right, standard 4F. You will be able to describe the impact of precious metal exports from the Americas. So export of precious metals. So what are precious metals? That is awesome silver and gold. Those are very precious. So after arriving in the Americas, the Europeans discovered that the land was full of natural resources. And the most important thing that they found they had huge amounts of were gold and silver. Gold and silver are going to be used as currency. So that is a form of money, and it's going to be used around the world. Therefore, it's going to be very important. The European greed for more precious metals contributed to the demise of the Aztecs and Incas. Inflation in Spain. The increased amount of precious metals into the Spanish economy, it's going to lead to inflation. And that means the decline in the value of money. So the value of money is going to go down. As more gold and silver was imported into Spain, it began to lose its value. The situation was made worse because of the growing Spanish population, which led to an increased need for goods. So merchants realized this, and they began to raise the prices of their goods, which led to people needing more and more silver in order to buy things. So an example of this would be if buying a loaf of bread only cost you 2 silver pieces, with the amount of silver that is in the economy, it's going to decrease the value of that silver. So with this inflation, a loaf of bread could cost you 20 pieces of silver. Kind of crazy. So here's a fun little cartoon. As inflation grows, the economy declines. So take a look at this guy blowing his bubble gum. He is labeled the economy. Inflation is very low and the economy is pretty big. Look at him. The economy is going to decrease. That means inflation is going to increase. And the more and more the economy decreases, the more and more inflation increases. All right, hope you enjoyed that fun little picture. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Standard 4 is done. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to email me or come see me, and I will see y'all on the flip side. Bye.